They can carry up to 50 tons.
Yeah, and that depended a little bit on it because in the early days, I mean, one like this, they carried salt marsh hay. It didn't even have a cabin. It probably didn't have a deck. So the ones we have replicas of could probably carry that much cargo. But some of them are only 20 feet long. And how about you? Do you have something to add?
They used to carry manufactured goods, spices.
Yeah. Where would they get the spices? Do we have spices growing around here? This cold climate?
No.
So where would the spices come from? Someplace warm, like maybe the islands, the West Indies? And here's an interesting, so these are photographs or copies of paintings that you might have seen if you've done online research.
Floating off into the Gundalow.
Yeah, so this boat, this big sailboat with a deep keel, came up the coast, maybe from the West Indies. And there it's loading onto a Gundalow, so the Gundalow could take the spices up the river to Durham or Dover or South Berwick, right? How do you think they carried those spices? What would they be in?
Boxes.
Maybe wooden crates, barrels, right? Sacks. Oh, I love this photo. Oh, you've seen this? Thin M. Where?
Dover Point.
No, closer to home.
Adams Point.
Closer to home than that. Well, if you live in Durham, closer to school than Adams Point. How's that?
Wagon Hill.
Nope, closer than that. This house is still standing. This is the General Sullivan House right across from the town landing. As we think from the late 1800s, but look how much cordwood that was holding. So when you go down to the landing the next time, in fact, we had the Captain Adams there a few years ago, and the Adams was built as a historic replica. And because of that, we've never been able to take people sailing on her. So that's why the Piscataqua was built. And when she was being designed and constructed, the Coast Guard was involved. So she's built to Coast Guard specifications. So she's certified as a passenger vessel. The Adams has been in the water since 1982. And she's still over there floating, but we're not doing any programs on her right now. But the Adams is the one that we've had up in Durham and for, I don't know, 3 or 4 times over the last, how many years is that? 30? 32 years.
The front is the bow, and we have a couple things up here like anchors, right? They're good to have an anchor if you want to stop midstream, maybe wait for the tide to be going the right way. So 2 anchors. Here's the difference between this Gundalow and the Captain Adams. Anyone know what this is for? A windlass or a winch, and this one's powered by battery power actually. But on a traditional Gundalow you'd have a crank that you could crank around. The Captain Adams has one to give you more power to do something like hoisting the spar. We said that we don't call this the mast, right? So what's this right here? So this piece is the mast, right? The stump mast. And then the much longer one here, we call it the spar. Yep, spar or yard. And so you can imagine the spar there is pretty long. It's 62 feet long. Since it's at an angle, we've measured it, and it's about 60 feet above the water. But there's a bridge. Just on Friday, we're going to head up towards Newmarket. So we're going to go up through Great Bay, and we have to get under the General Sullivan Bridge, which is 45 feet high. So what's the difference there between 45 feet and 60 feet? Yep. 15, yeah, so we have to be 15 feet shorter to scrape under the bridge. Sure. So they started to go out of favor in the mid-1800s, 1850s, 1860s, as the railroad lines started to be built. The railroads were taking a lot of their business, and they were able to run on a better schedule right through the winter. So railroads, and of course, later on, trucks and highways took their business as well. Sometimes they were just farmers who built their own Gundalows and used them to move goods. Sometimes a person would own several Gundalows and would rent them out to whoever needed them. I think at the time they were being used, most people were used to being on the water. People traveled by water a lot more. So there were a lot more professional sailors and a lot more people who knew something about sailing. So think there. You see this rope? We call it a line.
Oh, it was
once it's
the
ship.
one on this side.
Yeah, it goes back and forth between the sail and that black bar across the top. So you pull back on that to pull the sail out. So the sail is always up there. It doesn't have to slide up and down the mast, but it's just a matter of pulling it forward towards the bow or pulling it aft towards the stern to stretch it out. I know that some had a cabin in the back. Some of the nicest ones had a cabin with a wood stove to heat, some bunks so you could sleep. A lot of them didn't have that. A lot of them didn't have the wheel that we have, so you would have just steered with a tiller, or more basic than that, you would have steered with an oar. Not all of them had sails. They didn't always have a deck, so you can imagine a smaller boat, an open boat, without a deck, you'd be just sitting on the bottom, and you'd load whatever you could inside. Records of boats called Gundalows here from very early on, from the 1640s, 1650s, so shortly after this area was settled.
You have to imagine, if you put your hand like this, they were just shells. They didn't have decks, they were small, and they were just what you built so that you could move things on the river, because it took so long, just like the pigs, it took so long to get somewhere by land. And they went from that, maybe 20 feet, all the way up to something like that.
So one story is the raid on Fort Constitution out there at the very start of the American Revolution. So taking the gunpowder from the fort, transporting it upriver. The Gundalow was the obvious choice to take it upriver, far from where the British Navy ships could go. They were too big and too deep to follow. Another story involves, I think, a couple Gundalows were rafted together before that bridge existed to get out to Pierce Island and carry stuff across, carry weapons across. So they made a temporary raft or bridge out of Gundalows. But it's not the kind of vessel you'd want to use to go chasing down